Back when I was a first year in high school, I was part of this choir where we would sing songs our school required us to sing, like the national anthem or some church song. To be honest, I wasn't the best singer and only joined for the benefits of skipping class. The skipping class part was great and all, but staying late for practice was kind of a downside, especially when it was before a big school event. One day we had to practice near the school's botanical garden because the place where we usually practice was being occupied by another group of people. Some of the members of the choir were kind of hesitant about practicing near the gardens because there have been a lot of scary stories surrounding the place and no two accounts are the same. I, on the other hand, just wanted practice to be over. We practiced until around 8 or 9 p.m. Around this time, there would only be 2 gates that would be open if one wanted to leave the school. The college gate, which was all the way across from where we practiced, and the track and field gate, which was near, but you had to pass through the garden to get there. Me, being a lazy man, decided to take the shortest route out of the school, while the rest wished me luck and went the opposite way. I believe that any place can be creepy as long as it's dark, and the gardens were not the exception. I brought my phone to call my parents. It rang once before being answered. I talked into my phone, telling my parents where to pick me up, but no reply. I stopped the call and called again. Same thing, no answer. I called for the 3rd time to ask them to pick me up, almost shouting into the phone for an answer, but still nothing. I finally gave up and decided to text them. After walking through the garden for a couple more minutes, I finally reached my waiting destination without incident. It was a creepy walk, but I was kind of relieved that nothing out of the ordinary happened. My parents came after about 15 minutes of waiting, but something was off. When the car stopped in front of me, they got out and asked if I was okay, with very worried expressions on their faces. I said that I was fine. They told me that they did get my calls, and I asked if they could hear me. They said that they heard my voice saying, "Help me," over and over again. This is Charlie, and I live in Chicago. I've sent some of my cousin's experiences to your website before, and I keep coming here. Now I have had an experience that I wish to share with you. I was at my Aunt Jackie's friend's condo, babysitting a St. Bernard puppy named Kara. The condo itself is on Michigan Avenue in the South Loop of Chicago. The condo unit I stayed in that night faces east towards the lake, as well as Grant Park. My aunt has a friend in the building named Mike who owns Kara. I've been babysitting her from time to time ever since last November, but this is the first time anything weird has ever happened. It happened Saturday night, August 18th, around 10 o'clock p.m. Kara was in her little room sleeping on the floor. Her room faces the east. I was in the washroom washing my face when I heard her spring up from the floor and dash out of her room. She was going all around looking for me, and I came out of the bathroom to see her about to go into another bedroom. She saw me right away and brushed up against me like she was scared. It wasn't like her to be scared because she's a giant dog. She looked up at me with sad eyes and then turned to her room as if to say, "Something is in there." Now I was scared, so I grabbed an umbrella off the coat rack and slowly walked towards her room while she followed right behind me. I entered the room and found absolutely nothing. Then I started to think what could have freaked Kara out so much. Could a spirit have been in her room, or could there have been something from the outside that came up to her window and got her attention? I decided to take her out for a late walk, and when I ventured outside, I looked up to her window, but nothing was there. When we got back to the unit, she did not go to her room, which she always does when she gets back from her walk. Instead, she went to her master's empty room, which was very dark, where she laid on the floor. I decided to go into her room again, and she followed me in. When I got out, so did she. That night, I slept on a chair in the front room, where I was able to see the whole room so that nothing would come up behind me. As for Kara, she slept on the couch the whole night, which she never does. Every night she sleeps on the floor in her room where it's nice and cool for her. When the sun came up, I was very relieved and happy because whatever was there that night was gone now. So, I used to hear tons of stories about ghosts and also watch a lot of horror movies, but since I had never experienced any ghost encounters, I was like, these ghost stories are created by humans themselves to make money making movies about it all and other series featuring ghost hunters. Okay, let's get to the story. One day, me and my 2 friends visited this spooky forest. It wasn't nearby, but we managed to get there to just check it out as we loved the natural atmosphere. You know, giving my lungs some adrenaline of fresh air. By the time we reached the forest, it was about 7 p.m. when it was already getting dark. Just to let you know, there's no light source in this forest except for the entrance and exit of the forest area, so it was much darker than we expected. My friend had his iPhone and I had my tab with dual flash, so we decided to use them to at least see each other. An hour passed and we were just having a conversation and smoking cigarettes. We were sitting under a tree as it was thick enough for all of us to lay our backs on it and just sit and relax. We were having a good time until we started hearing a sound like 2 rocks smashing into each other or 1 rock smashing on the ground again and again. We were pretty confused. I told my friend that it must be an animal trying to climb a tree, making the weak branches fall off and making it sound like rocks. But the sound didn't stop for like 3 or 4 minutes. Now, after that, it stopped for a while, so we still assumed it was an animal making the sounds. Things went silent for about 5 minutes, and we started another conversation about this forest's atmosphere being so windy and cold. Then, apparently, a rock fell on my friend's head, and I wondered how a rock can be that far up in a tree. About 4 to 5 seconds later, a big branch from the tree fell on my lap, scaring the shit out of me, and my friend felt water drops falling on his neck from the top of the tree. I thought, how is there still a chance of water dripping down from a tree when the rainy season was already over 2 months ago? This night clearly was not our lucky night, as we heard the same rock sounds again, but now it sounded like they were getting closer. Immediately, without any other options to choose, we decided to run out of the forest as quick as we could. We were able to leave the forest safe and sound, and we headed to our homes. A few days after the incident, one of our friends posted a news article about the same forest. There was a huge tower just like a lighthouse, said the post. We had seen that tower from a distance, but didn't get any closer, as it was a rocky area and there was a chance one of us could fall off the small cliff. So, in the post, a boy was passing by the tower and the first thing he saw was a person, but only his head. The post also said that the police couldn't find the body, but just the head of the man, which was already found by the same person who saw it while passing by. But the question is, what happened to this guy? How in the world can this ever happen to someone? It could have possibly been the drug addicts who used the forest to get high, but why would a drug addict rip someone's head off? My questions about what happened in that forest will never be answered, and I will never visit that forest again, and neither will any of my friends. This past year, one of my son's junior high school classes went on an after-school field trip. It was on the anniversary of one of the USA's worst man-made disasters. Any one of the history class's students were invited to join in on going up to the St. Francis Dam to recall a minute-by-minute leading up to the dam breaking. So I've always been interested in what really happened when the dam broke. At 10:30 p.m., March 26, 2000, everyone met in the parking lot of the school. We all drove our own cars. I know there are a lot of spirits in the canyon in which the dam was built, and I knew I would see one that night. We had to hike in the dark up the side of what was once the St. Francis Dam. The dam was built in 1928 by Mullenland. It held 2.5 billion gallons of water when filled, and it had just been filled to the top 2 months earlier before it broke. The day it broke, it had been checked out by Mullenland himself and another engineer, and given the big okay, nothing wrong here sign, even though there was a good-sized crack in the dam wall. The dam broke at 11:58 p.m., when everyone in the Santa Clarita Valley was sleeping. Remember, everyone used to go to bed at 8 o'clock p.m., no TVs to watch to keep people up at night. When the dam broke, it was guessed the wall of water was over 170 feet high. Back to our field trip. So we all made it to the top of what was the dam, and my son's teacher is giving a minute by minute of what happened before the dam broke. My son was sitting in front of the teacher, and I was sitting about 25 feet away from them. As the time came closer and closer, I kept seeing this shadow trying to get up the side of the mountain, the side in which the water was stored. Just as the teacher said the dam has now broke, the shadow tried harder and harder to get to the top, but the rocks where he was trying to get his footing kept on slipping away faster and faster, and then he was gone. I didn't say anything to anyone. As we were driving home, I asked my son what he thought of the field trip. He told me it was interesting, and I interrupted him and said, except for the guy trying to get up the side of the hill? He said, "Yeah, you saw him too?" "You bet I did." There were about 450 to 475 people killed that night. Only 3 people who lived in that canyon survived. A woman and her baby because her husband pushed her out a window that faced a hillside, and a man that does not know why he was saved. His house was washed under but came back up with him on the roof. The water rushed all the way to the Pacific Ocean, killing all the while. Edison had workers set up in a campground around 20 miles away but along the water's path. Only the men that had their tents zipped up lived. Their tents floated to the top of what was still a 50-foot wall of water. If anyone would like to see pictures of before the dam broke and after the dam broke, go to History of Santa Clarita Valley website and they have plenty of pictures to show you. It will also give you an accounting of the dam breaking. I have a few short experiences to tell. This all started when I was about 12. I'm 19 now. My sister Zoe, my father, my stepmother at the time, and her 2 daughters, Jade, my age, and Maddie, my sister's age, were camping. We had only been there for a day, and everything was fine. Then, me and my sisters decided we were going to go to the stream by ourselves. My father gave us a walkie-talkie so we could keep in contact while we were gone. Now, the place we were going to was surrounded by bushes, and you had to get there by going through a little path. We spent a little while with our shoes off splashing in the water until Jade said she could see someone standing amongst the trees. We all looked and saw a figure. It was black, but you could tell it was in the shape of a man. You couldn't see the face. We stared for a few seconds and then he disappeared. We forgot about it and kept playing in the water, but I felt a little uneasy. A while later, we all looked back wanting to know if he was still there, and he was. Everything was silent. I could hardly hear the rapids in the little stream. We stopped looking. After about 20 minutes, we headed back to the campsite. My sisters lingered behind, and I was about 20 meters ahead of them, but we couldn't see each other. I heard a twig snap behind me, and I turned to look, assuming they had caught up to me. Nope. I turned to see the tall, dark black figure literally a foot behind me, so I started running. The whole time I could feel him close behind. I ran as fast as I could until I was out in the open campground. He was gone. My sisters came out not long after, and I told them what happened. I asked, but none of them had seen him behind me. They were too far behind, and the path was windy, so they were around a corner from me most of the time. Throughout our camping trip, we didn't see him around as much, but occasionally we would see him just standing there. Fast forward a couple of years, and we go back there with my father's new girlfriend and her daughter, Stella. I can't recall this trip as much, but I know for a fact that Stella saw him too. 3 years ago, I started seeing him at my fucking house. Just anywhere and everywhere, really. One day, I was out in the backyard and I started to lean down to pet my cat when, in my peripheral vision, I saw him right behind me. I ignored him as he's never really done anything harmful, really. I turned to look solely at my cat as to block him out. As I do, I feel a hand grab my hair and tug. I immediately spin around. There was nothing there. I fucked off inside as I was a bit spooked. I now live with my boyfriend and can't say 100% if I'll see him again. I sometimes see shadows move behind me in the reflection of the TV, but when I look behind me, there's nothing, so I just chalk it up to a trick of the light. I did hear something recently. This is the most recent event I've had. My boyfriend's alarm went off for work, waking me up too. He switched it off but laid in bed a bit longer. I was awake then, facing my boyfriend's back, when I closed as it was smushed against the pillow. Suddenly, I shit you not, I hear someone whisper my name in my ear. It was so clear and I could even feel cold breath on me. I sat up and said to my boyfriend, Did you say my name?" He looked confused. He was just sitting there playing on his phone. He said he hadn't, which I believed, because it was a female's voice. This doesn't really relate to my other experience, but I thought I'd throw it in anyway. I was serving in the military overseas in Yokosuka, Japan from 2012 to 2014. During my 2-year stay there, I settled down and began seeing a very lovely girl named May. May had told me she was pregnant with my child while I was on my deployment. I took responsibility for my actions, so we started to plan. 6 months into my 2nd year of service, during the winter, May gave me the news. My ship had been in dry dock for a year, and each ship, depending on how big the ship is, had a handful of duty sections. There was a group of crew members who watched the ship and took care of it while the rest of the crew was off. So it was my section's turn to watch the ship. During our evening meal, one of my shipmates asked if I could switch watches with him, being that my current watch was standing in the freezing cold for 5 hours. He thought giving me his barracks watch would lift my spirits up. It did. I took the proposal in a heartbeat. We both let our section leader know of the change. At 23:45 hours, I was on my way to the barracks to watch the barracks from 0000 hours to 0600 hours. The barracks watch was there for safety and to see the right people were in their respective rooms. I arrived right on time with 5 minutes to spare. I bought myself and the person I was relieving a coffee. I thought it would help them on their cold walk home. As the night progressed, I made my rounds every half hour, and when the wee hours of the morning came around, I started to doze off. I was awoken by a resident who couldn't sleep due to their neighbors crying.
"If you can get that girl back in her room and keep her quiet, I won't tell the supervisor that you were sleeping,"
he muttered, as if I had a choice. The barracks were 3 floors high and full of people, but at this hour, the silence had a certain eeriness to it, like you could hear your own heartbeat. My footsteps echoed like if I was in some sort of catacomb. As I made my way upstairs, I began to hear sobbing. I shook my head in disappointment. This should be fun, I said to myself. I reached the 3rd floor and I made my way down the hallway. The sobbing sounded like it was coming from the laundry room. Maybe the poor girl didn't want to wake her roommates, I thought to myself. As I made my way into the laundry room, the sobbing was low, like she tried to hide it. I stepped forward. "Miss? Are you okay?" I whispered. I turned the light on and I saw a young girl sitting on the floor facing the wall, leaning on the washing machine. I asked again, "Miss, are you all right?" I put some strain on it so she may hear me past her sobbing. I still waited for a response, but got nothing. It was late and I was tired and getting impatient. I got closer to her. "Hey lady, are you all right? I think you should call it a night," I yelled as I walked closer. Just as I did, the girl sprung up quickly. She looked sick, dark eyes, greasy hair, and she didn't look happy, like I ruined her crying game. Before I could open my mouth, she let out an ear-shattering scream, and it just kept climbing in pitch. I got closer to her to shut her up, but the noise was too much. I collapsed, and the last thing I remember was the sickly girl with her menacing face staring straight at me. All of a sudden, I woke up in the office where I watched the cameras. I would write it off as a bad dream from eating takeout, but I felt different. I felt cold. I didn't sleep again for the rest of my watch. A week later, I got news from May. She told me there were complications with the baby and she'd had a miscarriage. I couldn't help but think that the young girl in my night terror and the miscarriage could be linked. I'm back stateside now, and the experience has left a major impression on me.